artists are very good at representing this sort of thing. This is quite nasty, so these are your basic, hell-like monsters devouring other monsters, which maybe might actually be a good thing. So, but that's a representation in some sense of the war of everything against everything. You know, the old idea about nature being red in tooth and claw, and everything devouring everything else to keep existing, and a representation too of the sort of pain and strife that goes along with a life that's even quite peaceful. Nature's a vicious place. And you have to contend with it, and you don't know what it's up to, and it's virtually impossible to keep up with it. In Alice in Wonderland, Mother Nature's there, and that's the Red Queen, and she's the one who's always yelling off with their heads when they're trying to play croquet. It's like, really, that just doesn't seem civilized. And it's the Red Queen who says to Alice, in my kingdom you have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. And that's a good definition of life, because nature is always transforming. This is Kali, the devourer. It's a Hindu representation. And, well, she's quite the character, as you can see. I can tell you a little bit about the image in the middle, so that you kind of have some sense of what this... Like, religious images are often trying to represent these fundamental realities that I've been describing, these underlying structures of perception and cognition. So, Kali here is kind of she's a representation of all the things that you should run away from screaming, which is a good category. It's like the category of monsters and horror. And so, let's investigate her. So first of all, she's a spider. That's why she has 8 legs. And, people don't like spiders much because they're kind of poisonous. And they spin webs and capture the unwary and then devour them. So she's in this web of fire. That's the kind of column or the arch around her. And the fire is full of skulls. You can see the skulls inside the fire. So it's like a web of flaming skulls, It doesn't get more awful than that, really. And then her hair's on fire, and she wears a headdress of skulls, and then she's got a few weapons, in case you're not already terrified enough. And then she often has the tongue of a tiger, although I don't know if she does in that image. And then often there's a snake wrapped around her waist. But in this case, it's not a snake. You see those sort of coily things around her belly? Her belly is sunken. That's because she just gave birth to the guy that she's standing on, and she's devouring him by the intestines. So that's Kali. And it's a representation of everything you really don't want to mess with. And you should be very, very careful about. And if you make the proper sacrifices to Kali, well, then maybe she'll show you her benevolent side, and that would be a really good thing. And, people have been making sacrifices to gods forever and goddesses to try to get them to stop, doing this sort of thing. And, it's very easy for modern people to think about that as a superstition, but it's not a superstition. It's one of the most fundamental discoveries of mankind. And the discovery was, if you let go of something that you value now, maybe you'll get something better in the future. It's like that's the discovery of time. It's a phenomenal achievement. Human beings are the only people who discovered it consciously. Like bees make honey and they store it up for the winter, but probably they don't know what they're up to. But human beings can understand that a terrible fate might confront you, but if you make the right sacrifices now, you'll propitiate fate and you'll survive and thrive into the future. And that's why you're all here at university instead of, well, I presume you do no shortage of partying, but at least you're not doing it right now. You're making sacrifices to be here. And the idea is that if you sacrifice your valuable time, the time of your youth now, that the fates will smile on you in the future. And then, if you didn't believe that, you wouldn't be here. So you believe it. And you act it out. You understand it psychologically and conceptually, and archaic people understood it practically and dramatically, but it was the same thing. You better make sacrifices and hope that you can turn this into its benevolent counterpart. Well, then there's culture. This is another domain of symbols. It's a very attractive domain of symbols. I mean, to the degree that you're an aficionado of a sports team, you're tangled up by your symbolic longing for a place within a culture, and it's so tied up with your psychological being that you will act like the team is you. In fact, one of the weird things about human beings is that they'll often celebrate the victories of their heroes or their teams more intensely than they would ever celebrate anything that ever happened to them. I mean, how often do you see people at work, you know, throw their hands up in the air and then run out in the hallways and dance around because something good has happened? It's like it never happens. But if it's a football game or a hockey game, people will paint up their faces, and when there's a goal scored, which is a symbolic act too, right? Because, you know, human beings like to hit the target. There's a sexual element to that, but there's also an element of hunting, and there's an element of specifying your target and achieving it, you know, and doing that cooperatively with all the other people on your team and competitively in relationship to the other team. It's a real little microcosm. But the point is the symbolic element of that will grab you. Just like you're a primitive tribesman, and you won't even notice. You'll think, oh, I'm just having a party because my team won. It's like, yes, you are some peculiar creature. So, and you know, all the teams, they have their tribal logos, essentially, you know, and all the iconography that goes with it, and they're treated almost as if they're sacred objects by people who are the fans. You know, they'll go look at the silver cup, and they're happy if it comes to their town. It's like, don't be thinking you're not superstitious. You know, it's just that our modern superstitions are invisible to us, and we don't notice they're there. It's like, you're superstitious right to the core. And human beings have always been. Culture, superego. Freud's categories, id, ego, superego, map quite nicely onto nature, individual, culture. So that's kind of interesting. The king, the patriarch, the plow, the phallus, order and authority, and tradition. The wise old man and the tyrant. Dogma, the day sky, because it's illuminated. It's illuminated. The day sky is masculine in its symbolic nature. Your countryman, your brother, the island, the heights, the ancestral spirits, and the activity of the dead. To the degree that you're patriotic, you know, you're possessed by the symbolism of culture and the symbolism of the known. You would regard that as a virtue, right? What's more important to you, your own being or your family? Or your own being or your family or your culture? Which is more you? Well, it's not obvious, and depending on the situation, people make different decisions. As soon as it's wartime, everybody says, oh, my culture is more important than me, and off they march, you know, even if it's World War I, and all they're marching to is, you know, continual death. There's no, you're gripped by these things in ways that you just cannot understand.